In the silence of an abandoned cemetery, a 6-year-old girl desperately digs at a grave with her bare hands. Her nails are broken, her fingers bloody, and through tears, she cries out a sentence that makes a millionaire's blood run cold. "She's not dead. I can prove it." What happened next would forever change both of their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. Rain lashed against the windows of the 40th floor like desperate fists trying to break in. The millionaire remained motionless before the massive mahogany desk, his eyes lost in the grey cityscape stretching out before him. 3 years. 3 long years since his life had shattered like glass against concrete. The luxurious office reeked of coldness. Expensive paintings adorned the walls, but none of them carried human warmth. They were investments, not memories. The man had learned to turn everything into numbers, into profit, into a safe distance from the emotions that had almost destroyed him. "Mr. Sterling, the meeting with the Japanese investors is scheduled for 3 o'clock, announced his secretary, maintaining the professional tone he demanded of everyone. He didn't even lift his eyes from the papers, contracts, mergers, acquisitions, numbers that danced on the page without awakening any feeling. That's how he liked it. That's how he could breathe. The phone rang. Another business call, he imagined. But the voice on the other end made him stiffen even more. "It's about the cemetery, sir," said the private security guard. "Someone was seen messing with the grave. Again." The millionaire clenched his fists. He had hired private security precisely to prevent vandals from disturbing the only sacred place he had left. His daughter's grave was untouchable. It was all he had left of her. "Call the police," he replied with a sharp voice. "We already have, sir, but it's a child, a very small girl." Silence. The heart he had kept locked away for 3 years gave a strange beat, as if something within him recognized an echo of the past. A child. "Yes, sir. The guards are with her now. She's digging with her bare hands." The millionaire hung up the phone without a word. He grabbed his car keys and left the office, ignoring his secretary's calls about his afternoon appointments. Something primal, something he had buried along with his daughter, pulled him to that place. St. Michael's Cemetery was on the outskirts of the city, far from the upscale neighborhoods where he lived. It was a forgotten place where ordinary families visited their dead without the glamour of marble mausoleums. He had chosen that place precisely for that reason. He wanted his daughter to rest away from the media circus that her death had generated. When he arrived, the rain had stopped, but the ground was still muddy. The guards were waiting for him near the gate with confused expressions on their faces. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice coming out more hoarse than he intended. "Over there, sir," one of them pointed. "We can't get her away from there. She won't stop digging." The millionaire walked through the cemetery as if it were the first time. His footsteps echoed in the disturbing silence of the afternoon. He passed crooked crosses, faded tombstones, withered flowers that time had forgotten to take away. And then he saw her, a girl of perhaps 6 years old, dirty, malnourished, wearing rags that had once been a dress. She was kneeling before the white marble tombstone he visited every month. Her small hands dug into the damp earth with desperate urgency. Her nails were broken, her fingers bloody. "What are you doing?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The girl raised her face, big, frightened eyes, filled with tears, that mixed with the dirt on her thin face. But there was something in those eyes, something that made him take a step back. "She's not here," whispered the girl, her voice trembling but determined. "She's not dead. I know she's not dead." The world stopped. The air grew thin. The millionaire felt his legs shaky as if the ground beneath his feet had turned into quicksand. "What are you talking about?" he managed to articulate. The girl stood up, trembling, but keeping her gaze fixed on him. and then she said the words that would collapse the world he had built on rubble and lies. "She's not dead. I can prove it." The silence that followed was deafening. The millionaire stood paralyzed, as if the girl's words were a physical force that had struck him in the chest. The guards exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to react to the absurd situation. "You don't know what you're saying," he murmured, his voice almost a whisper. "You're just a child, a lost child who doesn't understand." "I understand," shouted the girl, her eyes shining with an intensity that did not match her age. "I know things. I heard things. They said she was taken away, that she never really got here." The millionaire's heart began to beat erratically. He approached slowly, as if he were dealing with a wounded animal. "Who said that? Where did you hear that?" The girl stepped back a few paces, still holding a handful of dirt in her wounded hands. "On the streets. I sleep under the bridges, near the hospital. I hear adults talking when they think no one is paying attention. They talked about a girl who was taken away in a special ambulance that had false documents that someone paid a lot of money to hide." "Stop!" The millionaire's voice came out louder than he intended. The guards took a step forward, but he stopped them with a gesture. "That's impossible. My daughter died in an accident. I saw the body. I arranged the funeral." But even as he said those words, memories began to bubble up in his mind, memories he had forced to the back of his consciousness. The accident had been strange. His daughter's body was too disfigured to be easily recognized. The procedures had been quick, almost rushed. And then he had given himself over to work, to drink, to the numbness that prevented him from thinking clearly about the details. "She had a mark," said the girl suddenly, interrupting his thoughts. "A birthmark on her right shoulder. It looked like a small heart." The world collapsed. The millionaire staggered back, seeking support on a nearby tombstone. No one knew about that mark, absolutely no one. It was something intimate, secret, that he and his wife had playfully kissed when their daughter was a baby. After his wife's death, when it was just him and his daughter, that mark had become even more special. It was their secret. "How do you know that?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible. The girl looked at him with an expression that mixed fear and determination. "Because I have one too," she whispered, and began pulling at the ragged collar of her dress. "No!" he shouted, rushing to stop her from exposing herself there in the middle of the cemetery, in front of the guards. "Not here, not like this." He took off his coat and wrapped it around the girl, who trembled violently as she felt the warm fabric against her skin. She was just skin and bones, he realized. A child who clearly hadn't eaten properly in a long time. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to her height. "I don't have a name," the girl replied, "or at least I don't remember one. People call me lots of things, but none of them are good." The millionaire felt something break inside his chest. He looked at that lost, dirty, hurt child, and for a moment he saw his own daughter. Not physically, they were different, but there was something in her expression, in the way she tilted her head when she spoke, that awakened memories long buried. "Do you have somewhere to sleep tonight?" he asked. The girl shook her head. "Come with me," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "We'll talk properly. We'll figure out what all this means." The girl hesitated for a moment, looking at his outstretched hand as if it were a trap. Then she looked at the grave, at the dirt she had dug, at her own wounded hands. "Will you listen to me?" she asked. "Will you believe me?" The millionaire didn't know what to answer. He didn't know if he believed her. He didn't know if he was capable of believing. But there was something about that girl, something that echoed the pain he had carried for 3 years. "I'll listen," he promised. "I'll listen to every word." And for the first time in 3 years, when she placed her small, wounded Hand in his, he felt that perhaps there was still something in the world beyond the coldness he had built around his heart. The car glided through the city streets in tense silence. The girl was huddled in the leather seat, lost in the coat that swallowed her whole. The millionaire drove mechanically, his mind in turmoil, fighting against internal voices that screamed danger, madness, impossibility. It was a mistake. It had to be a mistake. He had built his new life on the certainty of his daughter's death. 3 years of expensive therapy, 3 years of obsessive work, 3 years turning pain into numbers. And now a street child appeared, with impossible words, destroying everything he had accepted as truth. "Where did you learn about the birthmark?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Did someone teach you to say that?" The girl didn't answer immediately. She was looking out the window, observing the world of luxury they were passing through. Imposing buildings, expensive cars, well-dressed people walking along the sidewalks. "No one taught me anything," she said finally. I know things. Sometimes they come into my head like dreams, but they aren't dreams." "What kind of things?" "Things about a girl who liked to hide cookies under her bed, who was afraid of thunder, who called you Papa Bear when you did that." Gruff voice to read stories. The car almost skidded. The millionaire had to concentrate to maintain control of the steering wheel. Papa Bear. No one knew that nickname. It was something intimate, secret, that had died with his daughter. "Stop," he murmured. "Please, stop." But the girl continued, as if the words were gushing out of her uncontrollably. "She had a pink stuffed bunny named Mr. Carrot, and you always let her sleep in your bed when it rained because she was afraid of the thunder." The millionaire pulled the car over to the curb, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. Mr. Carrot was still stored in a box in his closet, untouched for 3 years. "How?" he whispered. "How can you know these things?" The girl turned to him, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw tears running down her dirty face. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know that she's not dead. I feel it in here." She touched her chest. "Like a part of me knows she's still alive somewhere." The millionaire closed his eyes, fighting against a storm of emotions he had kept bottled up for years. Fear, hope, despair, anger. Everything mixed in a whirlwind that threatened to destroy the fragile balance he had managed to build. "You need to understand," he said, forcing his voice to sound firm. "My daughter died in a car accident. I was driving. We crashed, and she didn't survive her injuries. I arranged the funeral. I saw the coffin buried." "But did you see her in the coffin?" asked the girl with a disturbing intensity. The silence was the answer. The truth was, he hadn't. The accident had been terrible. The body was too disfigured. The doctors had recommended a closed casket, and he, devastated by guilt and pain, had simply agreed with everything they told him. He just wanted that nightmare to end. "I'm going to take you home," he said finally. "I'm going to give you food, a bath, clean clothes. But that doesn't mean I believe this impossible story." The girl nodded, as if she understood that it was the most she could expect at the moment. When they arrived at the mansion, the housekeeper was visibly shocked to see her boss entering with a street child. But he was a man who didn't accept questions, so she simply prepared a room and provided clean clothes. While the girl took a bath, the millionaire stood in his private study, looking at a framed photo on his desk. His daughter, at 5 years old, smiling with Mr. Carrot in her lap. The birthmark was visible on her bare shoulder, a small, imperfect heart that he had always considered a gift from heaven. The phone rang. It was the family lawyer, the man who had taken care of all the legal aspects after the accident. "I heard you had some trouble at the cemetery today," said the controlled voice on the other end of the line. "The security guards reported a most unusual situation." "It's none of your business," replied the millionaire, "but There was something in the lawyer's tone that bothered him. Everything that involves you is my business, especially when it comes to dangerous fantasies. You've built a new life. Don't let a traumatized child destroy everything you've achieved. There was something in the lawyer's voice, a poorly disguised urgency, as if he knew more than he was letting on. "What fantasies?" asked the millionaire. "The fantasy that your daughter is still alive. It's natural in cases of traumatic loss, but you need to be strong. You need to think clearly." When he hung up the phone, the millionaire realized that the lawyer had called too quickly, as if he already knew what had happened at the cemetery, as if he had been expecting this call. And for the first time in 3 years, a corrosive doubt began to grow in his mind. What if the girl was right? What if there was something he didn't know about his daughter's death? What if everything he had accepted as truth was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie? Morning arrived with a golden light flooding the mansion, but the millionaire hadn't slept. He spent the entire night in his study, looking at accident documents, medical reports, photos he had avoided seeing for 3 years. Everything seemed correct, but now every detail took on disturbing new meanings. Gentle knocks on the door pulled him from his thoughts. The housekeeper entered with a worried expression. "The girl is awake, sir. She's asking to speak with you." He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the immense marble table. She had eaten only half of the plate that the housekeeper had prepared, but she looked like a completely different child. Clean, in clothes that finally fit, her brushed hair revealing chestnut strands that shone in the light. And there, exposed by the neckline of her t-shirt, was the birthmark. The millionaire approached slowly, as if he were walking through a minefield. The birthmark was identical, not similar, identical. The same imperfect heart shape, in the same place, with the same shade. "I knew you'd want to see it," the girl said, pulling the collar of her t-shirt down. "It's the same as hers, isn't it?" He nodded, unable to speak. His shaky legs forced him to sit in the chair next to the girl. "How is this possible?" he murmured. "I don't know," she replied, "but I know you need to look for the truth. I know you need to go to that hospital where she was taken." "Hospital? What hospital?" "St. Jude's Hospital, in the outskirts. That's where they took her after the accident. I heard the men talking. They said someone paid a lot of money for her to be transferred there, away from the expensive hospitals where you could keep track of everything." The millionaire felt a chill in his stomach. After the accident, he had been hospitalized for 2 days in serious condition. When he woke up, they told him that his daughter had been taken to a specialized hospital, but that she hadn't survived. Her injuries, he never questioned it. He was too shattered to question anything. "Do you want to come with me?" he asked, surprising himself with his own words. The girl looked at him with those big eyes, as if it were the first time someone had included her in an important decision. "Do you believe me?" "I don't know what to believe," he admitted, "but I need to find out the truth, and you seem to know things that no one else knows." St. Jude's Hospital was in an area of the city that the millionaire had forgotten existed. Deteriorated buildings, potholed streets, people who walked quickly to places that didn't offer much hope. It was a completely different world from his. The hospital itself was an old building with yellowed walls and the characteristic smell of cheap disinfectant. The receptionist looked at them strangely. A clearly wealthy man accompanied by a child who, even clean and well-dressed, still carried something of the streets in her eyes. "I'm looking for information about a patient who was transferred here 3 years ago," he said. "A 6-year-old girl, victim of a car accident." "Are you family?" "I'm the father." The receptionist typed something into the old computer, frowning. "That's strange. We have a record of the transfer, but then nothing, as if she simply disappeared from the system." "What do you mean, disappeared?" "The records stop abruptly. There's no discharge, there's There's no record of hospital death. It's as if she vanished. The millionaire exchanged a tense look with the girl. She nodded slightly, as if that confirmed something she already knew. "Can I speak with someone who was working here at that time?" he asked. "Head nurse Helen has worked here for 15 years. Maybe she remembers something." Helen was a middle-aged woman with tired but kind eyes. When the millionaire mentioned the case, she became visibly nervous. "I remember that case," she said, looking around as if she feared being overheard. It was very strange. The girl arrived in serious condition, but not critical. It was treatable. But after 2 days, men in suits came and took her away. Took her where? They said it was a transfer to a private hospital. But I've never seen anything like it. They had papers, authorizations, everything very official. And there was money involved. A lot of money. "Do you remember the names of these men?" Helen hesitated, then lowered her voice. "One of them was a lawyer. I heard him talking on the phone. He said that everything was going according to plan, that the father would never suspect anything. The world spun around the millionaire, the family lawyer, the man who had taken care of all the legal aspects, the man who had called the night before, too eager to know about the events at the cemetery." "Do you know this lawyer?" Helen asked. Noticing the pallor on the millionaire's face, he couldn't answer. He just took the girl's hand and left the hospital, feeling that the ground beneath his feet had turned into quicksand. In the car, the girl broke the silence. "Do you believe me now?" The millionaire looked at her, at that child who had appeared out of nowhere with impossible truths, and for the first time in 3 years, he allowed hope to crack the armor of ice he had built around his heart. "Now I believe," he whispered. "Now I believe." The following days turned into a strange routine. The girl remained at the mansion, and slowly she and the millionaire began to develop a connection that neither of them had expected. She accompanied him to the office, sat silently while he worked, watching his every move with those big, attentive eyes. At night, he found her reading books from the library, pronouncing difficult words with the concentration of someone who was discovering a new world. She was intelligent, he realized. She learned too quickly for a child who had grown up on the streets. "Do you remember going to school?" he asked one afternoon while she was drawing on a piece of paper. "No," she replied without looking up. "But sometimes the words come into my head already made. As if someone had taught me before, you know?" Her drawing made him stop breathing. It was a house, not the mansion where they were, but the old house where he had lived with his daughter. Every detail was perfect. The window of her room, the tree in the garden, even the swing he had built. "How do you know what that house looked like?" he asked, his voice barely audible. The girl stopped drawing and looked at him with a confused expression. "I don't know, I just drew what came into my head." Meanwhile, the investigation into the family lawyer was moving forward. The millionaire had hired a discreet private investigator who began to uncover disturbing things. The man had bank accounts far exceeding what his fees would justify. There were suspicious transfers dated right around the time of the accident. But the most shocking discovery was that the lawyer had bought an isolated property in the countryside, shortly after the millionaire's daughter's death. A farm where no one asked questions, where a child could be kept away from prying eyes. "He's building something," the detective reported during a call. "Some kind of institution. He says it's for special children, but there are no official records, no government authorization." The millionaire felt the anger growing inside him like a wildfire. If his suspicions were correct, the man he had trusted with his life and his assets had kidnapped his daughter, staged her death, and destroyed his family for money. One afternoon, while watching the girl playing in the garden, he made a decision that would change everything. "We're going on a trip," he said to her. "Where to?" to a place where maybe we'll find answers. The farm was a 3-hour drive from the city. It was an isolated place surrounded by hills and dense woods, perfect for hiding. Secrets. They hid in the nearby woods, watching the activity through binoculars. What they saw confirmed the millionaire's worst fears. There were children on the property, at least a dozen of them, of varying ages. But they didn't seem to be playing. They moved mechanically, as if they were medicated or traumatized. And there were guards, armed men who patrolled the perimeter. "She's there," the girl whispered beside him, her whole body trembling. "I feel it, she's in there." The millionaire looked through the binoculars again, and that's when he saw her. A dark-haired girl, a little older than the child next to him, walking across the courtyard. There was something familiar in the way she moved, in the tilt of her head. His heart almost stopped when she turned towards the woods, as if she sensed that she was being watched. For a moment their eyes met across the distance, and he knew it was her. It was his daughter, alive, imprisoned, but alive. "Daddy!" the girl beside him whispered, and it was only then that he realized he was crying. "What did you call me?" he asked, his heart pounding erratically. The girl seemed surprised by her own words. I don't know. It just came out." But the millionaire was beginning to understand. The identical birthmark, the impossible knowledge about his daughter, the mysterious connection between them. "You're twins," he murmured, the truth hitting him like a lightning bolt. "You're twin sisters, and someone separated you. Someone kept one and left the other to die on the streets." The girl looked at him with wide eyes, as if a complex puzzle was finally coming together in her mind. "That's why I knew," she whispered. "That's why I felt she was alive. Because a part of me has always been connected to her." The millionaire pulled her into a tight hug, feeling for the first time in 3 years that he had a family, again. But now that family was threatened, his daughter was imprisoned, and the sister he didn't even know existed had grown up on the streets, abandoned and forgotten. "We're going to bring her back," he promised, his voice firm despite the tears. "We're going to bring both of you back home." But as they made plans to rescue his kidnapped daughter, neither of them imagined that the lawyer already knew they had discovered the truth, and that he was willing to do anything to keep his secrets buried, even if it meant eliminating all the witnesses. The war was just beginning. The confrontation happened on a Monday morning, when the millionaire least expected it. He was in his company office, reviewing the plans to rescue his daughter, when the lawyer walked in without knocking. The man he had considered a friend for more than a decade now revealed a face he had never seen before. "We need to talk," the lawyer said, closing the door behind him and turning the key. "About what?" asked the millionaire, but he already knew. The expression on the lawyer's face was that of a cornered predator. "About your unhealthy obsession with impossible fantasies," the man replied, walking slowly across the room. "About how you're destroying everything we've built together because of a street child who has filled your head with lies." The millionaire stood up from his chair, every muscle tense. "Where is my daughter?" The lawyer laughed, a cold sound that echoed through the room. "Your daughter is dead. She died 3 years ago, as you've always known. What you need to understand is that some truths are too dangerous to be discovered." "I saw her," the millionaire said. Taking a step forward, "I saw my daughter at that farm, alive, imprisoned. You saw what you wanted to see. Illusions of a broken man who can't accept reality." But there was something in the lawyer's voice, a tension, a nervousness that contradicted his confident words. The millionaire moved closer. "How much did you get for her?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "How much was my daughter's life worth?" The silence that followed was revealing. The lawyer looked away for a fraction of a second, and it was enough. "More than you can imagine," he finally admitted. There are people in this world who pay fortunes for special children, beautiful, intelligent children, from wealthy families. They have much better fates than death. The truth crashed down on the millionaire like a hammer. It wasn't just kidnapping, it was trafficking. His daughter had been sold as a commodity. "You're a monster," he whispered. "I'm a pragmatist," retorted the lawyer. "Your daughter was dying in the hospital. The doctors said she might not make it. I simply redirected her destiny, and look what we've achieved with it. Your fortune has grown exponentially in the last 3 years. You've become even richer without the distractions of being a father." The distractions. The millionaire's voice came out as a roar. "You're talking about my daughter. I'm talking about a child who now has a better life than she ever would have had here, and you have a more productive life. It was a win-win agreement for everyone." The millionaire advanced, but the lawyer pulled a gun from his jacket. "Don't be stupid," he said, pointing the gun at the other man's chest. "You're going to forget all this. You're going to send that street child away and go back to your normal life. Or you'll find out that accidents can happen more than once in the same family." That's when the door opened. The girl entered the room, walking slowly, as if unaware of the danger. The lawyer swung the gun towards her. "The little witness," he said with disdain. "Maybe it's best to take care of everything at once." But the girl didn't stop. She kept walking, her eyes fixed on the lawyer, with an expression the millionaire had never seen before. It was as if she was seeing through the man, seeing something beyond the surface. "You know where she is?" the girl said, her voice strangely calm. "You know exactly where my sister is, and you know what they did to her." "Your sister?" The lawyer hesitated, confused. "We're twins," the girl continued. "You separated 2 children. Sold one and left the other to die on the streets. But we've always been connected. I've always known she was alive." The millionaire saw the lawyer's expression change. Confusion, then understanding, then panic. "Impossible," he murmured. "You should have died, I checked. You disappeared from the hospital. You should have died on the streets." "I survived," the girl said, still walking slowly. "I survived to find her, to bring the truth to light." "Stop right there," shouted the lawyer, the gun trembling in his hands. "Stop where you are." But the girl didn't stop. And that's when the millionaire understood. She wasn't just a brave child. She was a child who had lost everything, who had survived the impossible, who had nothing left to lose. "You're not going to shoot me," she said with an eerie certainty, "because if you do, you'll never be able to erase all the evidence. And because deep down, you know what you did was monstrous." The lawyer hesitated. It was only a second, but it was enough. The millionaire lunged at him, and the two fell to the ground in a struggle. The gun fired into the ceiling and then skittered across the marble floor. When it was all over, the lawyer was on the ground, defeated, and the girl was holding the gun with both hands, pointing it at him. "Now," she said, her voice as firm as an adult's, "you're going to tell us exactly where my sister is, and you're going to help us bring her back." The millionaire looked at that 6-year-old child holding a gun, dictating terms to a grown man, and felt a mixture of pride and terror. His daughter had inherited his strength. Both of them had inherited it. And now, finally, he knew the whole truth. The lawyer talked. Under the threat of his own gun, and before the girl's unwavering determination, he told everything. The farm was just a stopover. The children were groomed there before being sent to illegal adoptions overseas. Wealthy families who couldn't have children paid fortunes for children with pedigree, intelligent, beautiful, from good families. The millionaire's daughter had been sold to a couple in Switzerland. She was alive, but legally she no longer existed. She had new documents, a new identity, a new life. "They call her Sophia now," the lawyer said, his face sweaty and pale. "She doesn't remember anything. They use medication to ease the transition." The millionaire felt an anger so intense that for a moment he saw everything red. His daughter had been drugged to forget who she was, to accept a new family, to never miss the father she had lost. "How are we going to get her back?" he asked, his voice controlled with great effort. "You're not," the lawyer said with a bitter smile. "Even if you could prove all this, it would take years in international courts. And in the meantime, you'd be dead." "What are you talking about? You think I work alone? This operation involves very powerful people, politicians, judges, businessmen, people who can't allow this network to be exposed." As if his words were a signal, the bulletproof glass of the office window shattered into thousands of fragments, snipers in the surrounding buildings. The millionaire pulled the girl down as more shots ripped through the air where they had been standing. "They've come to silence us," the lawyer shouted over the noise. "To silence all of us." The millionaire scooped the girl up in his arms and ran for the door, but it was locked from the outside. They were trapped. The office on the 40th floor had turned into a death trap. "This way," the girl shouted, pointing to a panel on the wall. "That's just decoration." "It's not. I know it's not." She ran to the panel and pressed something the millionaire couldn't see. To his surprise, the panel opened, revealing a secret passageway. "How did you know about this?" he asked, carrying her into the passage. "I don't know. I just knew." They ran through the dark passage, hearing the sound of men breaking into the office behind them. The passage led to a secret underground parking garage, where the millionaire kept a car for emergencies. As they fled through the city streets, pursued by black cars, the girl held tightly to his hand. "They're going to kill everyone who knows the truth," she said, "including the children at the farm." The millionaire floored the accelerator. It wasn't just about his daughter now. It was about all those children. It was about breaking a network of monsters that turned lives into commodities. But when they arrived at the farm, it was already too late. The place was in flames. Firefighters and police surrounded the property, but it was obvious that there were no survivors. The bodies of the children were found in the basement, where they had been locked before the fire. The millionaire fell to his knees in the muddy ground, watching his last hope turn to smoke. His daughter was in Switzerland, but all the evidence of the criminal network had been destroyed. There was no way to prove anything. There was no way to bring her back. "They won," he whispered, the tears mixing with the rain that was beginning to fall. The girl knelt beside him, small and fragile, but with a determination that seemed impossible for her age. "No," she said firmly. "They didn't win. Because we're alive. Because I remember her. And because you're not going to give up." "How can you be so sure?" "Because you're my dad now," she said, taking his hand, "and because I'm going to help you bring my sister back, no matter how long it takes." The millionaire looked at that extraordinary child who had lost everything but refused to give up, and felt something rekindle inside his chest. It wasn't just hope. It was purpose. They had lost a battle, but the war wasn't over, and he would do anything, pay any price, to reunite his two daughters, even if it cost him everything he possessed. 6 months later, the millionaire was a completely different man. He had sold the company, liquidated most of his assets, and dedicated every minute of every day to a single mission: finding his daughter. The girl, who now went by the name Elena, a choice of her own, was always by his side like a small but determined partner. They had hired the best private investigators in Europe, hackers specializing in finding missing children, international lawyers who knew the loopholes in the system. Slowly, piece by piece, they were reconstructing the trail that would lead to his daughter. "We've found something," said Marcus, the lead investigator, during a video conference from his office in Geneva. "The couple who adopted your daughter lives on an isolated estate in the Alps. They are very discreet, very wealthy, and have powerful political connections." The millionaire leaned forward in his chair, Elena beside him watching the screen. Intently. "Is she okay?" he asked, his voice tight. "Physically, yes. She attends an exclusive private school, takes piano lessons, lives like a princess." But Marcus hesitated. But what? "The medication continues. She takes a cocktail of drugs daily, officially for anxiety and memory disturbances. But our experts believe they are drugs to suppress specific memories." Elena squeezed her adoptive father's hand tightly. "She doesn't remember anything at all." Fragments. Sometimes she asks her adoptive parents about strange dreams, dreams about a man who called her princess, about a pink stuffed bunny. They always say they are just nightmares from her time in the orphanage. The millionaire's heart broke a little more. His daughter was fighting to remember him, and every time she tried, she was convinced that the memories were just nightmares. "What's the plan?" asked Elena with the seriousness of an adult. "It can't be a traditional kidnapping," explained Marcus. "They have armed guards, military-grade alarm systems, and if something goes wrong, she'll be the first to suffer the consequences. So what do you suggest?" "A gradual approach. The millionaire will move to Switzerland, establish legal residency. Elena will attend the same school as her sister. Slowly, they'll get to know each other naturally, and when your daughter starts to remember, we'll be ready to act legally." It was a risky and time-consuming plan, but it was the only chance they had. The millionaire sold the last of his assets and moved to Switzerland with Elena. He bought a modest house near the international school where his daughter studied. Elena's first day at school was electric. The millionaire waited for her at the gate, nervous as a teenager on a first date. When she came out, she was radiant. "I saw her," she said, running towards him. "She was on the playground, playing alone. I went up to her and said hi, and she looked at me like she knew me from somewhere." "Did she say anything?" "She asked my name. When I said Elena, she was quiet for a while. Then she said she had dreamed about someone with that name." In the following weeks, the two girls became friends. It was amazing how similar they were, but at the same time different. The millionaire's daughter, who was now called Sophia, was more reserved, more cautious. Elena was pure energy and determination. But slowly, Sophia began to change. Playing with Elena awakened memories. She began to draw familiar figures. A big man reading stories, a stuffed bunny, a house with a swing in the yard. That's when the adoptive parents realized something was wrong. "Sophia is asking questions," Marcus reported during an emergency call. "They've increased the dosage of her medication and hired more security. And there's something worse. They're planning to move to another country where you can't follow them." The millionaire clenched his fists. After months of careful approach, of seeing his daughter slowly remembering who she was, they were going to lose her again. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "A week, maybe less." Elena, who had overheard the entire conversation, stood up from her chair with that determination he had learned to recognize. "Then we don't wait any longer," she said. "Let's get her now." "It's too dangerous. They could hurt her." "They're already hurting her," Elena retorted. "Every time she tries to remember you, they pump her full of more drugs. Every time she asks about the dreams, they tell her they are nightmares. This isn't living. It's prison." The millionaire looked at that extraordinary girl who had survived the streets, who had found a lost father, who was now willing to risk everything to save the sister she barely knew. "You're right," he said finally. "Let's bring her home." And for the first time in months, he felt truly hopeful. The plan was simple, but required surgical precision. During the school's end-of-year party, when security would be more relaxed and there would be many people around, Elena would approach Sophia with a specific message. Something that only someone who intimately knew her past life could know. The party was taking place in the school gymnasium, decorated with lights and balloons. Children ran from one side to the other while parents chatted in groups. The millionaire watched from a distance, his heart pounding erratically as Elena approached her sister. Sophia was sitting alone on a chair, watching the other children play. Even with the medication, there was a melancholy in her eyes that broke her father's heart. "Hi, Sophia," said Elena, sitting down beside her. "Hi, Elena. Are you okay? You seem nervous." "I have something to tell you, something important." Sophia turned to her, curious. "Do you remember Mr. Carrot?" Elena asked softly. The effect was instantaneous. Sophia's eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat, and she brought her hand to her chest as if something had broken inside. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. "Because I know about the Papa Bear who read stories to you. I know about the swing in the yard. I know about the birthmark on your shoulder that looks like a heart." Tears began to stream down Sophia's face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of memories that exploded like breached dams. "My father," she murmured. "My real father. Is he alive?" "He's here," said Elena, pointing discreetly to where the millionaire was watching. "He never stopped looking for you." Sophia stood up from the chair, swaying, looking in the direction indicated. When her eyes met her father's, everything else disappeared. The party, the noise, the other people. There was only a father and a daughter recognizing each other across 3 years of forced separation. 6 months later, the millionaire was a completely different man. He'd sold the company, liquidated most of his assets, and dedicated every minute of every day to a single mission: finding his daughter. The girl, who now went by the name Elena, a choice of her own, was always by his side, like a small but determined partner. They had hired the best private investigators in Europe, hackers specializing in finding missing children, international lawyers who knew the loopholes in the system. Slowly, piece by piece, they were reconstructing the trail that would lead to his daughter. "We've found something," said Marcus, the lead investigator, during a video conference from his office in Geneva. "The couple who adopted your daughter lives on an isolated estate in the Alps. They are very discreet, very wealthy, and have powerful political connections." The millionaire leaned forward in his chair, Elena beside him watching the screen, intently. "Is she okay?" he asked, his voice tight. "Physically, yes. She attends an exclusive private school, takes piano lessons, lives like a princess." But Marcus hesitated. "But what?" "The medication continues. She takes a cocktail of drugs daily, officially for anxiety and memory disturbances. But our experts believe they are drugs to suppress specific memories." Elena squeezed her adoptive father's hand tightly. "She doesn't remember anything at all. Fragments. Sometimes she asks her adoptive parents about strange dreams. Dreams about a man who called her princess, about a pink stuffed bunny. They always say they are just nightmares from her time in the orphanage." The millionaire's heart broke a little more. His daughter was fighting to remember him, and every time she tried, she was convinced that the memories were just nightmares. "What's the plan?" asked Elena with the seriousness of an adult. "It can't be a traditional snatch and grab," explained Marcus. "They have armed guards, military-grade alarm systems, and if something goes wrong, she'll be the first to suffer the consequences." "So what do you suggest?" "A gradual approach. The millionaire will move to Switzerland, establish legal residency. Elena will attend the same school as her sister. Slowly, they'll get to know each other naturally. And when your daughter starts to remember, we'll be ready to act legally." It was a risky and time-consuming plan, but it was the only chance they had. The millionaire sold the last of his assets and moved to Switzerland with Elena. He bought a modest house near the international school where his daughter studied. Elena's first day at school was electric. The millionaire waited for her at the gate, nervous as a teenager on a first date. When she came out, she was radiant. "I saw her," she said, running towards him. "She was on the playground, playing alone. I went up to her and said hi, and she looked at me like she knew me from somewhere. Did she say anything? She asked my name. When I said Elena, she was quiet for a while. Then she said she had dreamed about someone with that name. In the following weeks, the two girls became friends. It was amazing how similar they were, but at the same time different. The millionaire's daughter, who was now called Sophia, was more reserved, more cautious. Elena was pure energy and determination. But slowly, Sophia began to change. Playing with Elena awakened memories. She began to draw familiar figures. A big man reading stories, a stuffed bunny, a house with a swing in the yard. That's when the adoptive parents realized something was wrong. Sophia is asking questions, Marcus reported during an emergency call. They've increased the dosage of her medication and hired more security. And there's something worse. They're planning to move to another country where you can't follow them. The millionaire clenched his fists. After months of careful approach of seeing his daughter slowly remembering who she was, they were going to lose her again. How much time do we have? He asked. A week, maybe less. Eleanor, who had overheard the entire conversation, stood up from her chair with that determination he had learned to recognize. Then we don't wait any longer, she said. Let's get her now. It's too dangerous. They could hurt her. They're already hurting her, Elena retorted. Every time she tries to remember you, they pump her full of more drugs. Every time she asks about the dreams, they tell her they are nightmares. This isn't living, it's prison. The millionaire looked at that extraordinary girl who had survived the streets, who had found a lost father, who was now willing to risk everything to save the sister she barely knew. You're right, he said finally. Let's bring her home. And for the first time in months, he felt truly hopeful. The plan was simple but required surgical precision. During the school's end-of-year party, when security would be more relaxed and there would be many people around, Elena would approach Sophia with a specific message, something that only someone who intimately knew her past life could know. The party was taking place in the school gymnasium, decorated with lights and balloons. Children ran from one side to the other while parents chatted in groups. The millionaire watched from a distance, his heart pounding erratically as Elena approached her sister. Sophia was sitting alone on a chair, watching the other children play. Even with the medication, there was a melancholy in her eyes that broke her father's heart. "Hi, Sophia," said Elena, sitting down beside her. "Hi, Elena. Are you okay? You seem nervous." "I have something to tell you, something important." Sophia turned to her, curious. "Do you remember Mr. Carrot?" Elena asked softly. The effect was instantaneous. Sophia's eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat, and she brought her hand to her chest as if something had broken inside. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. "Because I know about the Papa Bear who read stories to you. I know about the swing in the yard. I know about the birthmark on your shoulder that looks like a heart." Tears began to stream down Sophia's face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of memories that exploded, like breached dams. "My father," she murmured. "My real father. Is he alive?" "He's here," said Elena, pointing discreetly to where the millionaire was watching. "He never stopped looking for you." Sophia stood up from the chair, swaying, looking in the direction indicated. When her eyes met her father's, everything else disappeared. The party, the noise, the other people. There was only a father and a daughter recognizing each other across 3 years of forced separation. She started walking towards him, slowly at first, then faster until she was running. The people at the party stopped to watch the girl who was running, crying, toward an unknown man. "Daddy!" she cried, throwing herself into his arms. The millionaire picked her up, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And she was. She smelled different. She had grown. Her hair was longer, but she was his girl. She was his princess. "I knew you'd come for me," she said between sobs. "Even when they said you were dead, I knew it wasn't true." "I'm never going to let you go again," he promised, his voice broken with emotion. "Never again." That's when the adoptive parents appeared, accompanied by security guards. The man was tall, with grey hair, with an angry expression. The woman seemed more frightened than angry. "Step away from our daughter," ordered the man in English. "She's not your daughter," retorted the millionaire, still holding Sophia in his arms. "She was kidnapped, drugged, sold to you as a commodity. We have the legal documents, an international adoption, completely legal. Documents based on lies, based on the staged death of a child who never died." Sophia turned to her adoptive parents, and for the first time in 3 years, she spoke to them without fear. "Did you know?" she asked, her voice small but firm. "Did you know that I had a real father?" The hesitation in the woman's expression was revealing. "Sophia, darling, you're confused. The medication, sometimes it causes hallucinations." "I'm not confused," shouted the girl. "I remember everything now. I remember the accident, I remember the hospital, I remember men taking me away while I screamed for my father." The entire gymnasium was silent now. Parents and children watched the dramatic scene unfold. Some were already recording with their cell phones. "Call the police," said the adoptive father to the security guards. "We've already called." "Them," said a voice behind them. Marcus had arrived with a team of lawyers and investigators, but more importantly, he had arrived with evidence. "We have here the results of the DNA test," he announced, showing official documents, confirming that this child is the biological daughter of this man. "We also have recordings of the lawyer confessing to the kidnapping, and we have evidence that you knew about the illegal origin of this adoption." The world crashed down on the adoptive parents. In the following months, while the case played out in international courts, Sophia was placed in the custody of her biological father. The medications were gradually withdrawn, and with them, the last vestiges of the fog that had obscured her memories. She and Elena became inseparable. It was as if the 3 years of separation had been just a bad nightmare from which they had finally awakened. But the true healing came when Sophia, on a sunny afternoon in her new room, found a dusty box in the closet. Inside it was Mr. Carrot, exactly as she had left him 3 years before. She hugged the stuffed bunny and cried. But this time, they were tears of happiness. Her family was reunited. A year later, life had found a new rhythm. The mansion that once echoed empty now vibrated with laughter, animated conversations, and the sound of 2 girls discovering how to be sisters. The millionaire had learned something fundamental. True wealth was not measured in numbers, but in moments, like the morning he found Elena teaching Sophia how to make origami in the garden, the two sitting under the tree where he had built a new swing. Or the night when Sophia asked him to read a story using his Papa Bear voice, and Elena laughed so hard she almost fell out of bed. The court case had ended with the conviction of the adoptive parents and the exposure of the entire international trafficking network. Other families had found missing children. Other children had been freed from gilded cages where they were luxury commodities. "Daddy," said Sophia one afternoon, as the 3 walked along the beach near the new house he had bought, a simpler, more welcoming place. "I have a question." "You can ask, Princess." "Why did Elena find me? Why did she just happen to appear digging at my grave?" The millionaire looked at Elena, who was a few steps ahead, collecting shells on the sand. The question Sophia asked was something he himself had questioned countless times. "Do you believe in destiny?" he asked. "I don't know." "Do you?" "I didn't," he admitted, "but now I think some people are born connected in ways that science can't explain. You're twins." Even separated, even without knowing of each other's existence, there was an invisible thread linking you. Eleanor approached, overhearing the conversation. "I always knew I had a sister," she said simply. "I couldn't explain how, but I knew. It was as if a part of me was missing." "And now?" asked Sophia. "Now I'm complete," smiled Elena. "We're complete." They ran back towards the water, splashing and laughing, and the millionaire stood there watching, feeling a gratitude so profound that it almost hurt. He'd lost everything once: his wife, his daughter, his faith in human goodness. He had turned into a man of ice, believing that money could replace love. But two extraordinary girls had taught him that the human heart has an infinite capacity for regeneration, that true love cannot be buried, cannot be bought, cannot be destroyed by greedy men. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep, he sat in his study looking at the photo that now decorated his desk. Elena and Sophia embraced, smiling at the camera, with Mr. Carrot squeezed between them. There were no more photos of tombstones or memories of death. There was only life, future, hope. The phone rang. It was Marcus, calling from Geneva. "We found another one," said the investigator. "An 8-year-old girl, daughter of a Brazilian businessman. She was kidnapped 2 years ago, sold to a family in France. Is the family willing to finance the rescue operation?" The millionaire didn't hesitate for a second. "We're on our way," because he had learned something fundamental. When you have a second chance to be happy, you also have a responsibility to give that same chance to others. His fortune was still considerable, but now it had a purpose greater than profit. Elena appeared at the door of the study in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Is there going to be another adventure?" she asked, with that disturbing intuition she always demonstrated. "Maybe," he smiled. "Would you be up for helping another family reunite?" "Always," she said, walking up to him and snuggling into his arms. "But first, can you read us a story? Sophia is having nightmares again." He carried Elena back to the girls' room, where Sophia was awake, holding Mr. Carrot against her chest. "Papa Bear?" she asked sleepily. "Of course, Princess." And as he read to his 2 daughters about brave princesses and happy endings, the millionaire understood that he had found something more valuable than all the money in the world. He had found his place in the universe, as a father, as a protector, as someone who had learned that true love can survive any storm. Outside it began to rain, but inside that warm room, lit only by the soft light of the bedside lamp, there was only peace, security, and the certainty that some stories really do end well. Because when love guides, even miracles become possible. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. Share in the comments. Do you believe that twin siblings can have a special connection that goes beyond science? Your experience can inspire our next story.